Right then, hello everyone. Welcome to our first ever episode of this podcast. Today, it is my utmost pleasure to introduce you to a very kind and gentle personality, but an extraordinary person who has throughout his life excelled despite facing many difficulties. He moved to the UK at the tender age of 7, but unfortunately, he faced many difficulties being a social whether it being socially as a migrant, financially as well. But nevertheless, he still moved on from that. He wasn't the brightest academically, but yeah, his willpower and hard work to succeed and become someone in his life led him to go to university and get accredited with accountancy. That same willpower and sheer aura of this person made him go from earning just merely £3 a day in a restaurant to now running a multiple award-winning accountancy firm, Khalid Javid and Co. And he's a self-made millionaire, and he owns a Rolls Royce. What more would you need? And now yes, and it will be a great honor to learn from him today and share this on with many people so we can all learn from him. He's met many different personalities throughout his life, whether it being Bill Clinton, Nicola Sturgeon, and he has very closely worked with Prince Charles's charities. He's a very charitable and charitable man, and he loves his entrepreneurship. He's a great business leader in Scotland. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Mr. Khalid Javid. Thank you for your time, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here on the podcast, and we're all looking forward to learn a huge deal from you. So we'll just kick off with just a slight introduction about yourself, briefly, where you've come from, what your life has been like, and how have you come to being an entrepreneur and at this stage being one of the most recognizable figures in Scotland.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much, Ron, for inviting me today.
Thank
I
you.
think if I was to write a book about myself, I think what you've just said there would take care of the entire book itself.
Wonderful.
Yeah. As you said, yeah, I came as a migrant here at the tender age of about 7.
Yeah.
My father, we followed our father here, who came here, like many other immigrants that came here in those days. I remember my dad telling me that he came over in a ship. Why? Because it was cheaper. The ships
Yeah.
actually sailed from, I think it was New Zealand, Australia, bringing wool, picking up passengers and goods from Calcutta, coming into Karachi, and then going up the Suez Canal and into Limassol, up Cyprus, and then into Liverpool,
Oh,
where
wow.
my dad came in. And he had some family members that were in Manchester. So the port to land in was Liverpool. But my dad did say to me that on that particular ship that he came on, it was a journey of about 21 days. And
Oh,
you
wow.
imagine in 21 days that the people back home did not know if you're healthy, wealthy, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Normally, if we go now somewhere, we can pick up our mobile cell phone and phone or do a WhatsApp, whatever. In those days, you couldn't. So for 21 days, nobody knew if you were dead or alive.
Right.
Those were the humble beginnings of my family in Manchester. My dad worked in many Lancashire mills in Manchester until one day he saw in a Urdu newspaper, which was called Mashriq, and it said bus drivers wanted. And the only sort of academic qualification my dad did have is that he could drive a car. He wasn't all that highly educated from Pakistan. So he moved to Glasgow and worked on what was then called was the Central SMT buses. Those of you in Scotland will remember them as the red buses.
Uh-huh.
We followed on suit with our dad. We stayed in a room, not a house. We shared a room with other people in a house. And it was, I think, within a short period of time, my dad bought his first house for £300. And I remember him telling me that was £80 deposit and the rest you paid up. In those days, Raman, nobody ever believed in a mortgage. Nobody believed in a 25-year mortgage. Why? Because nobody knew that they're going to stay here for 25 years. Everybody had this vision, we'll come over to Britain, as they say in Scotland, make a couple of bob, go back home and settle down. I believe that would have happened, provided that those immigrants did not invite their families over. If they just had themselves over here, they may have returned back home. But because families came over here, children were born, education started, marriages took place. And I think when I was growing up, our father always said, well, I think my son must get a better education here, then
Mhm.
we'll go back. So the saga continued. And this saga did not just continue with myself. I believe it continued with a lot of people here in UK and even the rest of the world. We all have this dream of going back. I remember my dad saying to me years. In fact, I remember everybody's dad saying to us, "No, we must make some money and we must make a house in Pakistan or India where you're from, because one day they're going to kick us out." And I'm talking about the time when Enoch Powell was making all these speeches
Yeah,
that
yeah,
they were
yeah,
going
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
do.
That was
So
difficult time. Yeah.
it was a very difficult time. But we the how can you say the second generation of myself, we had an even more difficult time, Raman. Why? Because we had to try and be better than the indigenous people here. We had to be better in how we dressed, how we spoke, how we academically did better. But it was not easy. It was not easy. In Scotland, they had these junior and secondary schools. I don't know if they have them in England, but here, if you were not very brilliant, you ended up in a junior secondary. And if you were academically brilliant, you ended up in a senior secondary.
Uh-huh.
And for my role, I ended up in a junior secondary.
Oh, well.
That was in about 1970s. And had it not been for the government to combine the junior and the secondary schools and make it a comprehensive, I would have not gone on to any further education.
Mhm.
I can say with pride that in my school, which was St. George's Road Secondary, in a class of 30 in the first year, the first year class I was in was 1C. Remember, that means that was a bottom class in the first year. So we
Yeah.
had A, B, and C. So I was in C class. And in
Mhm.
my class, we had a student of 30 people in that class. And when our Christmas exams came, what they did was they added up all your marks to see what position you got in your class. And would you believe it? I came 28th in the class.
I've
I,
heard you speak about that before. Yes.
I came 28th. I don't know if those other two attended the exams or not. But but when my report card went home,
Yeah.
and all parents, my dad wasn't very happy.
Uh-huh.
So he he disallowed me to go out and play regularly. He said, "Stay home, do your homework." He helped me with whatever he could. And when the summer exams came, in that same class, I was fourth in the class.
Oh, well.
So yes, these are the humble beginnings, and I'm sure my story can be shared with a lot of first generation people, Raman.
Definitely, definitely. First generation people would take a huge pride, but I guess it's mainly the people who've been brought up here. They can learn a lot from your story, because what we like to do is we get into the habit of saying, "Oh man, we deserve better. Why is God doing this to us?" But you've actually face so much more difficulties than the people who've lived here, who've been brought up here, especially in this generation. No internet back in the day, like you said, and no phone calls, nothing whatsoever. And you still manage to work extremely hard and move yourself up the field. So that's we are all extremely proud to hear that story. I'm sure it will be helping a lot of people. So the next question I want to get onto is that I heard you talk in an interview that you've learned a lot from business personnel around you, whether it being your father or other businesses that were going on around you. And so I was just wondering, did you have any mentor growing up who taught you about different businesses, or who gave you any business ideas, or how you want to go into your life and how you get prepared for that?
Raman, what we had in those days was my father would invite one of his friends who lived here, who were from back home, and I remember that on particularly on a Sunday morning, we all had to get up, clean the house really nice and clean for our visitors. But our mother would be at the kitchen making the food for the visitors who are going to come. So when these visitors came, so we used to sit down with them, and I think those people, those first generation people, you could say was my mentors anyway, because
Mhm.
we used to hear stories of how it was back home. We
Yeah,
used to hear stories of how it was for them here.
yeah.
Uh, some of them did excel in whatever they did, and those were the first. How can you say the first kind of mentors that we had
Mhm.
in our life? But Raman, when I was of the age to leave school, um, I don't know not why, but I started reading a book by an author called Sir Douglas Bader. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
No, I haven't personally heard of him. No.
Sir Douglas Bader was probably just like myself. He wasn't all that educated, but he wanted to join the Royal Air Force,
Mhm.
and they would not allow him in. But eventually, he got in. He fought in the World War One and World War Two. He lost both of his legs, but he still went back He still went back as a pilot and fought the Second World War. And after that, he did many sort of trainings that done in Beggar Hills. So you can say that to me, Douglas Bader was my first mentor. That
Uh-huh.
here's a chap who fought in the World War, who lost his legs, but he still came back. So to me, that particular gentleman had the courage, the spirit,
Hmm.
and reading books like that. I suppose in a way, when we were younger, if we read the Marvel comics or whatever,
Yeah.
we all wanted to be Superman. We all wanted to be Spider-Man. In
Yeah.
fact, I remember the first time I went to see a James Bond movie,
Okay.
Doctor No of Sean Connery,
Uh-huh.
and actually coming out of the cinema, we used to walk around the streets just kidding on. There's somebody looking around our back, so we were
Uh-huh.
thinking that we were the special agent. So
Yeah.
it was a whole mixture, Raman, of who were our mentors, but certainly the first generation, and definitely the hard work that they did. And my sitting has always been with elderly people who were always older than me. And
Hmm.
I picked up a lot from these gentlemen who showed me what life was. Um, I did want to excel in business,
Yeah.
but because academically I wasn't there, I couldn't do all that great. And my story then goes on that did I get into the Royal Air Force?
Uh-huh.
No, I did not get in because at that time, we're talking about the 1970s, when they did my interviews and everything, I passed the aptitude, the physical, but their questions kept coming up. Do you have any family members in the forces? And I said no. And because I didn't have any history, I
Yeah.
believe I rejected for that reason.
Okay.
So choice was leaving school and taking up an apprenticeship,
Hmm.
which meant that you left school at the age of 16, 17 and took up an apprenticeship. So
Yeah.
my life started working with government shipbuilders here in Glasgow
Uh-huh.
uh, under a training centre called the Strathclyde Training Centre.
Mhm.
And I was noted that I was the second Asian ever to be in there.
Okay.
So that's how life ended up in the 1970, 76, 77.
Hmm. Okay. Very interesting. That very interesting. Do you think that an aspect of it is kind of like, because you come from a family who's like an immigrant-based family, and they've come from a foreign country? Was there an aspect of making your parents proud, and you have to become someone because they've dealt with many hardships in their lives, and stuff like that?
Yes, no, yeah, I think all parents, whether they were from here or there, all parents want their kids to do well. They
Yeah.
want them to do well in life, financially, marriage, education wise. But I think our parents expected a lot more from us because now that we were here, we had a chance for education. And in the early 70s, in every family, if you were going to choose a career, I mean, it either had to be a doctor or an
Mhm.
engineer.
Yeah.
There was no other, because as an engineer, you could work worldwide, and as a doctor, you could do the same.
Mhm.
Uh, I couldn't make it as a doctor, so I took up engineering at government shipbuilders. Yes, parents do expect you to do a lot better than they did in every form, and they did the best they could with what they had, teaching you, guiding you. In those years, we didn't have mentors or people that we could look up or who had been to university.
Mhm.
Remember now, Robert, that we're in Scotland. We're not
Yeah.
in London,
Yeah.
where maybe it was second or third generation.
Mhm.
Uh, we were, how can you say, the second generation in Scotland,
Yeah.
and we had to rely on guidance not only from our parents, but people who were maybe just a little bit better off in educational attainments. And your careers officer in school always looked at your marks, at your report card, and suggested what you could or could not do.
Yeah.
Um, and that's how I ended up at Government Shipbuilders. But I believe that every parent wants their child, whether it's male or female, that to excel in any way possible, not just to make the parents proud, but to show it to the next generation, to show it to people back home that
Mhm.
you became an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer, etc.
Yeah. So obviously that period of your life, you've studied in school, and you went from being 28th in the class to being fourth, and then slowly you go on to excelling in your professional life after you've kind of like left school and stuff. I've heard you speak in an interview that you worked in a restaurant for £3 a day. That was extremely shocking to know, knowing that you're so successful right now. So just briefly tell us about that phase of your life. How difficult was that, and what did that teach you personally?
Robert, before I went on to university,
Yeah.
academically I was not there. So what I did was I went on to further education, and this wasn't found out by myself, but some people told me that if you did not excel very well at secondary school, you can go on to what was called further education. They called them FE colleges, where you can go and try and do a little bit more, which I did. Once I'd been there, jobs were not easily available,
Mhm.
and in Scotland, there were no mills, there were no factories
Yeah.
as such. So, but there were carryouts and restaurants. People had came over here, had their shops, and now opened up restaurants and carryouts. So I believe the year at that time was somewhere about 1976, 77, that I took up a job in a restaurant, washing dishes
Uh-huh.
for £3 a night. So we started at 5 and we finished at 2 in the morning.
Well,
At that time, there was no national minimum wage.
mhm.
There was nothing like health and safety. So you're working in a restaurant and you're washing dishes. £3 a night seemed great. But I remember that working in that restaurant, that I tried to be efficient as possible, Raman, and I washed all the dishes as quickly as possible. But the people in the kitchen, they said, "Have you washed the dishes?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, now you can start peeling the onions." And I went, "Oh my God, wash dishes. I've never peeled onions."
Yeah.
So started peeling onions, and the onions went 2 or 3, Raman. It was a big sack. It was a big
Uh-huh.
sack. I don't know, maybe it was like 15, 20 kilos. So you slowly started peeling the onions because that was going to make the gravy.
Uh-huh.
And accidentally, Arman, I cut myself.
Oh
When I
no.
cut myself, I didn't want to go and tell the chef or the kitchen people that I've cut myself, because that would have meant that I was inexperienced and I might not have been able to keep the job on.
Uh-huh.
And I remember pressing my thumb and cut where the blood was coming out and peeling the onions. But the story is, it went on from there. I did not give in to any task that was put on to me. But I'll tell you what the worst one was, Raman.
Yeah.
When the next week when I went back to work, I'd washed the dishes. And do you know what they said to me?
Yeah.
They said, if you finish the plate, would you mind making a dough out of the atta? Raman,
That
that's,
was a pretty off.
it must be the hardest thing in the world to do. You've
Okay.
never made patis, you've never made a dough. So
Yeah.
here you are, you're thinking, how did your mum do it? You're
Yeah.
trying to put some water in, add in flour. It becomes too, how do you say, whiskey. Then you got to put in more flour to
Yeah.
make it a hard dough.
Uh-huh.
Eventually, I did it. But you know what the next question was? What do you
Well,
think, Raman?
I have no idea. Surprises.
They said, now that you've made the dough, can you make some chapatis?
Oh no.
You're at the age of maybe 17 or 18.
Yeah.
Like everything else, we gave it a chance. My first chapati turned out like the map of Africa.
Map of Africa.
It only went on better and better there. So
Yeah.
these were those days in the 1970s where you just took the job you can get. As I said, there was no national minimum wage, and it was £3 a night. You worked from 5 in the evening and you worked till 2 in the morning.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Now, one can learn a lot from that story because, like you said, you were trying to be so efficient. You wanted to like learn more from that job. Another person could have seen like, oh, I don't want to do this job anymore. This is like not my standards. But you were still going out there, cleaning the dishes, doing what you were told as efficiently as you possibly could have. But I was just wondering, is there any point while you was doing that job that you felt like, okay, is this my life? Is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Or did you know that you will make yourself better?
I think, Raman, in those periods of times, I think everybody who worked in a restaurant, they just seen that as a job. Nobody
Mhm.
seen that as a life. It was a means to an end. You
Yeah.
just did it. Why? Because there was nothing else about. If a job in a restaurant was the only thing about, that's what you did. And the people who worked in restaurants saved enough money. They didn't know what else to do because that's the only thing they had. So they ended up opening their own restaurants and their own takeaways. For myself, was there anything else I could do? No. But I'll tell you what happened to me. I believe it was around about 1979. I had excelled from becoming a kitchen porter
Okay.
to becoming a waiter.
Right.
And one day, if you're too young to remember this, Roman, but there was a store called CNA's.
Oh, I never
CNA
heard of
stood
that.
for
Yeah.
Child and Adolescence. That's what it stood for. And I went in there to buy a black pair of trousers because that's what waiters wore in those days. And when I went in there and I asked the lady, the attendant, to help me direct me to the trousers, and she pointed out, when I went over there and I said, no, I'm sorry, these are not the trousers I'm looking for. The trousers I'm looking for are the flared, the bell-bottom trousers.
Yeah.
I presume you're a bit young to remember that, Raman,
No,
but bell-bottom trousers were, how can you say, Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta? So, so she told me, no, those trousers we don't stock anymore, and it's been 2 years that I stopped stocking them.
uh-huh.
And I said, God, I've been working in a restaurant. Fashion has passed me by, and I didn't even know. That's the day I decided to go back again to further education and
Okay.
attain better qualifications and go on to a better life. And
Right.
I think when you're working hard, whether you're working in a shop or a restaurant or a factory, unless you're unless you're a little bit more academically qualified, you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to be there. It's going to be a status quo.
Mhm.
So at that time, I went back to further education, and from there, I actually wanted to study law, but because it didn't have a foreign language
Yeah.
and Urdu was not known as a foreign language, I instead of wasting a year, I took up accountancy.
Okay. Okay. So that's how it started off then. Right. Wonderful. Did you have any backlash from family, or did they ever say to you, okay, why do you need to go back to academics? Can't you just carry on working where you're working? Or were they very supportive of you to achieve and study in whatever you want to?
No, I think, Raman, I think they were very, very supportive because working in a restaurant meant you got up about 9 o'clock in the morning, had your shave and your shower, you were
Hmm.
at the restaurant at 11 o'clock, you got a break for a couple of hours, then you're back at the restaurant. So you didn't come home till, after midnight. So
Yeah.
could you imagine the people who are married, they leave early, they come
Yeah.
back, they can't see their wife, they can't
No.
see their
No.
kid, they can't be any, how can you say, quality time with them.
Yeah.
So that's how difficult it was for everybody.
Uh-huh.
Uh, you had one day off in the 6 days that you worked. You had one day off, and in that one day, you had to go pay all your bills. You had to do your shopping because in those days, mothers didn't go out to pay the bills. It was also the fathers or the head of the household. They
Yeah.
had to do so much, whether it be decorating the house or whatever. And at the same time, you that one day you had to socialize as well. So
Mm.
it was a lot for them to do. So no, for my parents, they were very supportive that I went on to further education, and I believe that my father did try his best to make me work hard as possible. But it wasn't just it was a whole family commitment. Because I was the oldest in the family, I would pave the way for the other members of my family to do the same, and
Okay.
that still exists today. That if one child goes off to university, I remember some people saying you only need to educate one child, the eldest. When he makes it, then he educates the other younger child, and the sort of rolling ball it takes place. And I believe that's been going on with a lot of families over the years, and I believe a lot of people have excelled in that way.
Did you feel any pressure because of that? That you had to like look up, your younger siblings had to look up to you, and you had to make a great example for them?
I think No, I think there wasn't any pressure because when at that age you don't know what pressure is. You don't
Uh-huh.
know what being a mentor or anybody like that. You don't know what that is. You just put your head down and you go on with it.
Mm.
While you were doing your own work, you help your younger brothers and sisters with their homework. It wasn't seen as it was a pressure or anything. It was just something that we had to do. And I think that something comes from the first generation of people who came to Britain,
Mhm.
whether they were from India or Pakistan or Bangladesh. It wasn't a pressure. They just had to do it. Whether you had to work long hours, unhealthy conditions, you just had to do it. It wasn't an element of pressure. Nowadays, I hear a lot of children saying, when you talk to them about university, oh, there's a lot of pressure on me and all that. And sit there and think back, God, you don't know how lucky you've got it.
Exactly.
We growing up, we didn't just have education, but we had to work as well
Yeah.
because your father could be the only member of the family who was earning. Everybody else in the family had to earn as well. In fact, I put up a post up there recently on my Facebook
Mhm.
about a Singer sewing machine. And I said, did anybody ever have these in their house? And I was amazed the amount of people who said, my mother had it, my sister had it. So while the father worked wherever he worked, the mothers in their house had the sewing machine. They were sewing, whether they were making jackets or sweaters or whatever. But it was a whole combination of a family supporting a family. It wasn't just one head of the household.
Wow. Wow. That is we it is extremely amazing to see, like, how our generations personally have struggled so much, and now we complain and moan over little things, that we haven't been given this, we haven't been given that. It's so amazing to see the hard work and dedication that you guys and our parents have put in. So that's amazing. Now I just want to move on to your career. that you specialize in now, which is accountancy. And obviously you went on to study into university and you got your HND in accountancy and stuff like that. So, I've heard you give examples about, Formula One cars and like, how you can, steer yourself where you see an opportunity and put yourself in the, driving pole position. And then when you come around the circuit again, and then, it just becomes that little bit easier for you the next time around. So just wondering, how can you relate that to, your accountancy career? And tell us more about that example that you normally give out.
I always say that in life, if you passed your driving test and you're driving a car, that means everybody can drive a car. So you've shown your attainment, you've shown your knowledge of excelling that way.
Mhm.
And a lot of people just end up driving cars, but the same driving skills can be put onto a Formula One track. So you just have to be a wee bit more careful. You just have to look for the opportunities. We have now Sir Lewis Hamilton. Now, when you look at him driving a car, you always see how he juggles in and juggles out of an opportunity that he can take place and go forward. And I think a lot of people who are in business or education, they've got to look at that opportunity and excel forward. But people do say everybody can drive a car, but not everybody can get onto the Formula One racetrack. I disagree with that. I think everybody has the opportunity, but the only thing they lack is maybe what I call is an attitude within themselves that they must do this. And once they have that attitude, they've got to have a direction to follow that through. So if person like me, who's had humble backgrounds, who could do it, I don't see what's stopping anybody else. A lot of people, like you say, Raman, they will say, oh, well, it's just difficult, there's pressure, I can't do this. No, it's all about your attitude towards what you want to do. If you want to be a boxer, you can't just sit at home and say, I want to be a boxer. You've got to go out there and train for it. If you want to go to university, you've got to do the same. But I believe that anybody, and regardless of what they say, if you've got the right attitude, and that's what's the most important thing is, if you want to stay in bed and just dream every day, that's different. But if you want to stay in bed and dream, but after you've dreamt, you want to go and get your goals, you've got to have that attitude. And if you don't have that attitude, you're not going to get anywhere. So I believe that anybody can do anything they want. If people say to me, no, I can't do this because of this, that reason, it's a simple thing that they haven't got the attitude. Now, the next thing we're going to move on to is, I mean, where do you get that attitude from?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it inbuilt? Is the attitude inbuilt from you? Well, your attitude can come from a lot of places. It can come from reading books. It can come from watching people, how they're doing. It can even come from watching films. Yeah. And let me share this with you, Raman, that I has always been intrigued by the film The Godfather, starring Marlon Brando. Right. And I think to myself, what is that got common in business? And I remember going to a Royal Bank of Scotland seminar to listen to a speaker, and the speaker hadn't turned up. And the chief executive asked me if I would mind talking. I said, not a problem. And he said, what's going to be the title of your talk? And I said, The Godfather and Business. To start a little bit. But I believe that if in the film The Godfather, they keep mentioning what's called organized crime. Mm-hmm. Crime can be done in a certain way, but they mention this word called organized crime. And I took the words of being organized. See, if you want to do business, see if you want to do education, you've got to be organized. And if you don't organize yourself in anywhere forum, you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to be hovering about. So the element of organizing your attitude, your direction, that is very, very important. Mm-hmm. So those people who are listening to me today and who are thinking of developing themselves further, whether it be in education or business, get organized. Don't just say, oh, this isn't working for me. Raman, I've been working in restaurants. Well, I worked in restaurants nearly 40 years ago. And today, maybe you go to a restaurant as well, and you sit down and you order a portion of pakora. You get 8 pieces of pakora, a wee bit of salad, a lemon, and a pakora sauce.
Exactly, yes.
Well, I'm glad you agree with me, Raman, because see, 40 years ago, they did exactly the same thing. 40 years ago, that's how they served pakora. So although pakora is being served there, why hasn't any restaurateur, why hasn't any chef came up and said, I want to do a little bit different. And that's what I mean by attitude and direction. We may have the pakora and everything, but why not do it a different way? Why keep having this? Why do we go to a restaurant and always order poppadom and spiced onions? I'm sure there are other starters in the world from the ethnic minority that can come and help develop. But my question is, why? Why is that not happening? And the simple reason is they're not organized. They come in, same thing again,
Yeah.
day in, day out. That doesn't help. You've got to excel. You've got to watch people how they're doing things. Once you become organized, you get your direction and you get your attitude. That's where you're going to fly high in business.
Right. Wonderful. Wonderful. Great stuff. So is that same sense of, accountability, that organization, that attitude towards, I need to do this and, I need to become successful. Is that the same attitude that led you to become an accountant? And, briefly talk to us about, how that journey started and what was the difficulties at the start and how did you just manage to move on and, become the success that you are today out of your accountancy business?
Raman, I think one of the things that happens even now is that your first battle or your is to get into a further education college. Your first battle is to get into university. Then your second battle becomes studying and getting through those examinations.
Yeah.
Once all that happens and you graduate and everything, the biggest battle then becomes you can't get a job anywhere because there's so many people running after the same job. And people do get demoralized. I know people who have got very good academic qualifications, but they're working in menial jobs because they can't get anything else. But people should not give up and keep on going. And that's what exactly happened to me, that it was difficult to get a job. And for a period of time, I went abroad with one of my friends to go and search for a job, but not realizing that once you cross over into Belgium, that it's not English that's spoken all the time.
Yeah.
Every country has their own dialects, their own language. So that was news to us again. So, but eventually when I broke out and I got a job, and I remember working in an accountancy firm, my salary was £50 a week, £10 a day, which was, to me, that was great because at least if I wasn't earning, I was getting the experience.
Yeah.
So I went on from there and I worked for a number of years in that particular firm. And then I thought, no, I'm only earning £80 a week. My salary had risen from 50 to 80. And I said, £80 a week? No, I don't want to do this. And at those times, I heard that restaurants were offering £200 a week. So the element of came back into me. Maybe I could go to a restaurant, I earned £200 a week. So I decided to give notice, hand my notice and left my job. And I was going to start working in a restaurant when, lo and behold, somebody approached me and said, can you do our accounts for 3 years? I said, well, why is your accountant not doing them? He said, our accountant has just had a heart attack and he's in hospital. So over the weekend, Raman, I did this chap's 3 years accounts. Now I had to type these accounts out. And I remember going out and buying what was then known as an Amstrad 9512. And I started there typing the accounts out. And Raman, do you know how I typed the accounts out?
Okay.
One finger.
Oh, no.
On the keyboard.
How long did that take you?
Sorry?
How long did that take you?
Oh, I think it took me a day and a half typing out, making mistakes, going back. So once I'd done that, the gentleman came to me and said, I said, there's your accounts there. And he said, how much are your fees? I said, 3 years accounts I've done for him. What shall I charge him? I remember that when I went out to buy the computer had cost me £475. And I said to this gentleman, 3 years accounts, £500. And do you know what happened, Raman?
Yeah.
I put my hand out and he put £500 in my hand.
I
thought, wow, I was going to work at a restaurant for 200 quid. And here's me, in 3 days I've earned £500. And that was April 1990. And from there, I just went on. And you can see, I opened up my own small office and just took off from there. It wasn't a case that it was easy. It was a case of how to organize yourself and give the business people what they wanted. If somebody wanted a set of accounts, 3 years accounts in 3 days, give it to them. You become organized, you've got your attitude, you've got your direction. And those were the humble beginnings in 1990. And I just took them from there and went on and on. I did have a lot of people who helped me along the way. People would say, well, don't spend so much money on office space, don't do this. But I remember it was 14th of August 1990 that I took office space and started my business. And I said to God, God, whatever you do, just put £50 a week in my hand every week, enough petrol to put in my car to come back from home to work. The
Mhm.
rest I will try and do. And that's exactly what happened in 1990. Slowly things got better and better and better.
Yeah.
Uh, but there was, remember, there was ups and downs when I had started in 1990. I used to do the work for a lot of our ethnic minority, and
Uh-huh.
I felt great. I felt great of doing the work and getting a check from them. And one of the checks I got in the early days, I held on for 3 or 4 days. I was so glad that I got a check. And Raman, after the fifth or sixth day, I put the check in the bank.
Bounced. Bounced.
Bounced. It
Oh
bounced.
no. Oh no.
So again, the element of how can you say sagging, being demoralized came in, but I still persevered and went on and on. And I think 1997 came in, and that was me 7 years working away, did not give up, and I decided to throw the towel in. At 1997, I did not want to be an accountant anymore. It was difficult. It was impossible to
Uh-huh.
deal with the ethnic minority. They had their own ways of doing business.
Yeah.
You know, that own way of doing business, we had not learned that at schools or colleges or universities.
Yeah.
Now this was the real world where you did work and you did not get paid. The real
Uh-huh.
world was when people made promises and did not carry out their promises. This was the real world.
Mhm.
So, 1997, about to give up, and I ended up joining the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce.
Uh-huh.
There was a chap there called Duncan Tannehill who helped me a lot. And one of the courses I went on to was a course arranged by Dale Carnegie. They're a big training firm.
Uh-huh.
And when I went in there and did the course, I realized that I had confused the element of being a businessman and being an accountant. I thought an accountant knew everything. No, an accountant only knows the books and records. A businessman is a guy who knows everything. So I had to turn my accountancy business into a business and not just be an accountant. And that was 1997.
Mhm.
And slowly, I put those, whatever I had learned from the Dale Carnegie seminars, I started reading their books and everything. I started actually reading more. I started attending more seminars. I started attending more network meetings, etc. I started watching people how they did things. I started reading about people in magazines such as the Vanity Fair, etc. I started reading how people excelled. And the small bits of reading that I did, I took that and put them into my life. And 1997 went on to become the year 2001.
Yeah.
And 2001, and I proudly say that I bought my Mercedes S-Class cash. I paid cash £51,000. And do you know how much pride I had in writing out a check for £51,000 by the year 2001?
Oh wow. Wow. I guess all these small wins have led you to, gaining so much self-confidence as well throughout the years. And obviously it just raises a very brilliant point where you've just mentioned. It's just that, you went on after you had struggling year in 1997, you went on to read more, you went on to like discovering about yourself more and discovering where you were going wrong and how you can improve yourself further. Because too quickly people these days, they just think they've known everything, and no one can teach them anything. That's a very important point for like someone to take, that there's no age to stop learning. People can just continue to learn whenever they want to. So that difficult period in your life in 1997, uh, how did you manage to get yourself out of it? What were your what were you thinking at that time? And did you ever feel like, okay, that's it, I'm gonna boom, enough of this, I'm gonna do something else?
No, Raman, that did come into my mind in 1997. As I said, I thought I'll go back and work in a restaurant, it'll be better. But as I said, once I started reading more, once I started reading more magazines, more periodicals, I started watching people how they did things. And I think all the things I learned, I slowly tried to put that into myself. I I knew that if I was meeting a client, I was the guy who had to be in command, not the other way around.
Hmm.
I always believed that I sat there in my office and whatever the client said, I just sat there and yes, yes, thank you very much. And I listened to them. But I turned it around that this is what you want. This is what you want me to do. I can do it for you in that matter of time, but this is what it's going to cost you. It's up to you now whether you accept this or not.
Hmm.
And if those people chose not to accept, I was happy because I didn't want to be demoralized afterwards by doing all the work and then finding out not getting paid.
Yeah.
And those small things not only go, Raman, they don't only go with your work, they go with your handshake. They
Hmm.
go with your writing instrument. They go with your watch. They go with how you dress. They go with how you walk. They go with how you talk. So over the years, you had to reinvent yourself, reorganize yourself, and become a totally different person altogether.
Hmm.
If you if you look at the Sylvester Stallone and the Rocky films, he
Yeah,
had a bad start in the beginning, but he
very
really
bad.
developed himself. He got to be further. So even watching a film can help you realize that, listen, you could do one better than this. It doesn't have to just stop here.
Hmm. Definitely, definitely, definitely. And obviously, you are a very, very, you deal with many businesses day-to-day basis. You have to organize yourself from a very early morning. So it's natural for me to ask you at this point that what is your morning routine like? Because I heard you speak in a program that you were up and ready to go at 4 a.m. while the others were just kind of like waking up and like getting dressed up and stuff like that. So tell us about your morning routine. How do you make yourself feel positive in the morning, and what is it like? What is the things that you go through in your mind for a tough day ahead?
Yeah, well, first thing in the morning is my alarm goes off at now 6 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
and by 6:35, I say my daily prayers. I read a wee bit of the Quran with understanding, which is
Okay.
very important. I think a lot of people read a lot of things, but they don't read it with understanding.
Mhm.
In the Sikh faith, they will read. You will go to the Gurdwara and the Sanskrit you will hear, but sometimes you don't understand what's being said. So
Yeah.
I think it's very, very important that it's dissected and read in a language that you can understand. So I do that with the Quran, a little bit of exercise, and by early morning, when people are just getting out of their bed, I'm at my table starting work. When I
Hmm.
mean starting work, when I come into my office, my desk has got to be absolutely clean and tidy. I can't have a desk which is already full of paperwork. That means I'm not organized. So the day before I leave, I've got to make sure that all my paperwork and everything is okay, that I come in a nice clean desk and I'm ready. I've got to make sure that when I leave my home, that my shirt is nice and crisp. I've got to make sure my tie matches my socks. I've
Hmm.
got to make sure that I've had a good clean shave. I've got to make sure that my car starts. So all these things I've got to make sure and take on and go forth. If you don't do these small things, you will never excel to the next point because you will be always stuck there. How do I do this? How do I do that? If you come to your table first thing in the morning and it's all full of paperwork, you're going to sit there and thinking, where do I start?
Yeah.
But if you come to a desk where it's nice and clean, that's where you start. Raman, I sometimes get a lift off people. And when I sit in their car, yeah, there's bits of paperwork, there's cans of Coke,
Yeah.
there's crisp, there's a McDonald's wrapping bag lying there. And I think, this guy ain't organized. He's
Uh-huh.
never going to get anywhere. And as I meet them and I talk to them, I find out they're not organized. So your organization ability is not just your desk. It's not just your car. It's not just you. It's the whole thing. It's
Uh-huh.
everything. Everything.
So do you think your morning routine and waking up early empowers you in a different way? Do you think it gives you an edge to succeed over other people? Do you think that's helped you in your career?
Definitely, Raman. Definitely, Raman. If you are up in the morning, you're praying to God for blessings, but you're up in the morning early, you're bright. While, like I said, while people are just getting up, you're up and you're ready to go.
Hmm.
While people are just scrubbing their eyes.
Yeah.
So you're at work, you're not stuck in a traffic jam, you're
Yeah.
ready to go there. You always take a different route when you're going into work in the morning because you will have a different experience, you will see different things. I see a lot of people, it's the same motorway, it's the same street, it's the same place where you park the car. No, you should always be different. Park your car at a different place, walk around the street, so you meet a lot of different people every day, and those
Uh-huh.
different people are going to give you a different experience of life.
Yeah.
Me being in the city center in Glasgow now, I have made a lot more friends than I ever did before.
Mhm.
I meet lawyers, architects, other accountants, etc. And it's a good morning. How do you do? And even sometimes people will say, I've seen you parking and I don't really know who you are. It's
Uh-huh.
amazing how much you can learn from them.
Yes, definitely, definitely, definitely. And what other habits do you think are important, to becoming successful in life and becoming a great entrepreneur, or any other thing that you want to excel in, any other field you want to excel in? Obviously, organization you said is one. Having the quality and will to like move on and not, get demoralized. Another one. What other things that you think you have? What are the other qualities you have that separated you from so many others?
I think, Raman, if you take from the first generation of people who came in here, and
Yeah.
one of the things that I salute to them was their courage of not giving up.
Mhm.
The courage of not giving up regardless of what the situation was. And that courage has been built into us. And I think it should be built into next generation people, that whatever you do, whether it's education, you may fail an exam once, reset it, pass it again. You may fail your driving test once, pass it
Yes.
again. You may not get into a particular university, go into another one. But
Uh-huh.
whatever you do, just do not give up. Do not give up on your dreams. Make your dreams your goals, and make sure you surpass them. Don't be half-hearted and say, well, I've done my best. It's not. If you look at every single business person and you ask them, how did they do, where did they go, the example is, I think I read somewhere, Coca-Cola, the company, multinational company, what
Yeah.
was it? They sold 25 bottles in the first year.
Really?
If you and I did that today, we would give up business to say, hey, this ain't no business. 25 bottles, we can't make money out of this. There's a lot of people who have done the exact same thing. And as long as you don't give up, whatever you want to do, some people give up because they don't know that was the right way. You've
Mhm.
got to go and find out, Raman, what was the right way. And that finding out could be in books, periodicals, talking to people and getting for it could be even an element of networking with other people
Mhm.
who have done well, and ask them, how did you do this? I remember, Raman, sharing this with you. When my dad had his own business, and he had his own accountant, and we in that day had to go and get a bursary form filled out. And the
Okay.
bursary form would be filled out by the accountant. They would tell you details of my dad's income. Depending upon that, I would get a certain amount of money from the government. And I remember going to my dad's accountant and getting the form filled in. And my dad's accountant asked me, what do you want to do by going to college or university?
Uh-huh.
And because he was an accountant, and I said, maybe I want to be an accountant like you one day. And he turned around and said, no, 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 don't do that. Take over from your father, do his business. So I looked at him and said, that's no encouragement.
Yeah.
And all years later, now that I became an accountant, and the interesting thing is, occasionally that accountant told me to go and work in my father's business. I occasionally give him a lift home, or even take him to the mosque.
All right.
So the element was that you should never give up whatever you do. Just because you fail once does not mean you're a failure.
Mhm.
Everybody who's in business today, everybody who's doing well has failed at one time or another, more
Definitely.
times than the people who have thought whether they should go ahead or not.
Mhm.
You hear a lot of people who will say, well, I've had enough, I don't want to do anymore. That's not the right attitude to take. If you look at the boxer Muhammad Ali,
Yeah.
did he ever give up? Look at Mike Tyson, he's coming back. Did he ever give up? Look at all the film actors. If they were told, look, you look at the icon Amitabh Bachchan, he was told that he could never do it in films. He's too tall, his voice is too heavy, but he still did it. There was a lot of people who would never just give up. And I think that's very important in the coming up generation. They give up too easy. They give up too easy on jobs. They give up too easy in education. They even give up too easy on marriages. So
Mm.
you've got to work at it. You should never give up whatever it is. Moving on from here, Raman, you've seen one of my pictures when I was stocky, when I
Yeah.
was heavy, when I was fat,
Yeah.
and uh, at that age, oh God, what I must have been about 50 plus or something. But I said, no, that's no way. I've got
I
to
was
go and
gonna
try.
come to that. Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
on you go, on you go.
Wonderful. No, because that is such an important thing because you managed to go from 97 to 77 at the age of 53. I think it was 20
Yeah.
kg lost. You know, what was it at that stage, where you thought, I'm getting a bit older, I could just I'm okay with my weight, it doesn't matter. But what was it that spurred you on to lose all that weight? And that can be so motivational for so many different people. Share us that story, please. Thank you. Tell us.
What was happening in Glasgow when I was in Glasgow? You were just coming into work, doing your thing, going home. You went home, you ate your food, and you sat there and watched the box. That was
Mm,
it. That was
yeah.
life. You got into your car, you came into work, you sat in a chair, and that was your life.
Uh-huh.
What had happened in that time was I I ended up getting a client in London, and I went to visit him. I went to visit the client, and once I'd finished my work with him, I just went shopping, window shopping, and
Okay.
I walked into a very nice street called Bond Street.
Hmm.
And when I went into Bond Street, and we don't have so many designer shops here in Glasgow. And one of the designer shops I went into was an Armani shop. And I went in there and I looked out, and to me it was like Bollywood. You've got all these designer clothes and everything. And as I walked along, and I would put my hand on a certain shirt, a certain coat, and I would ask the attendant, "Can I get this in my size?" Do you know what they told me?
Mm-hmm.
They said, we don't have your size.
Wow.
Now, designer clothes are not meant for fat people. Designer clothes are meant for designer people.
Yeah.
So there's a certain way, there's a certain thing that the fashion industry has got. So when I came back to Glasgow, and I felt so bad that I couldn't wear these clothes. Now that I had the money, I
Yeah.
had made money, I could buy these clothes. So that's from there on, I changed my diet, I changed my exercising and everything. And as you can see from some of my pictures, I
Yeah.
went from like 97 kilos to 77 kilos. And you know what the amazing thing was? I felt so confident. I felt so good. You know,
Uh-huh.
eh, I went from a, what was that, an 18 collar to a 14 and a half collar.
Yeah. Wow.
We
Wow.
didn't know. I didn't know. I thought there was small, medium, and large. I
Uh-huh.
never knew there was an XS. I knew there was an XL. I didn't know there was an XS. There was an extra small.
Yeah.
So to me, that was and you know, Roman, the confidence that gave me, you know, when I'd lost weight, I looked smart when I was wearing. I would walk into a room and I didn't need to look at people. People started looking at me. And when people start looking at you, the amount of confidence, Roman, that gives you is unmeasurable. You
Unmeasurable.
know,
Definitely. Definitely.
other than you being in a room and trying to introduce yourself, people are asking who you are.
Yeah.
You know, so that was a boost of that was a boost. So those people who are a little bit overweight, get
Uh-huh.
into a regime of getting yourself organized, get into a regime of eating healthier, get into a regime of exercising a little bit better. Raman, I recently met a chap who was the same age as me.
Uh-huh.
I could not believe he looked about 20 years older than me. And I
Wow.
think it's because he had given up on looking after himself. And I
Uh-huh.
come back to that thing that never give up whatever you do, you know, whether it's exercise, education, whatever, even as little walk or whatever, it can work wonders. It can work wonders. And
Definitely.
the amount of internal energy it gives you of
Mhm.
you being confident, of you being able to get into an extra small or t-shirt and everything. You know, the other day somebody commented on my Facebook, you know, it
Yeah.
was Fesson from Glasgow. He said, you looked fat and grumpy. Maybe I did, but that was then.
Yeah.
But people now ask me, you know, how did you do this and how did you do that? You know, it's amazing the things you can learn as you go on. If if Mike Tyson can do a comeback after all these years,
After all
there's
these
nothing,
years, yes.
there's nothing stopping any one of us.
Wonderful, definitely. So obviously the whole aim of this podcast is to like, introduce different people like yourself so they can share their ideas, the experience that they've had in life, so many of us can learn from it and, become the better versions of us, of ourselves. But how does one start on that journey in whatever they want to do, whether they want to lose the weight, whether they want to, become an entrepreneur and they're currently an employee, or whatever they want to do in their life? What is the starting process? How do they start off?
I think, Raman, the starting process is always up here, which is the
Mm-hmm.
thought. You've
Mm-hmm.
got to have the thought, whatever you want to do. And you know, God Almighty has given us this body
Yeah.
with ears, eyes, nose, but on the top of all the level, He's given us this thing that's called the brain. And there's a reason that that thing is on the top. If you don't use that, the rest of it is not going to work. So I
Exactly.
think anybody who wants to excel in any way or form, you've got to get that thought in your head. And sometimes, occasionally, it's better to write those thoughts down as a journal so that you can come back to it. If you just put it in your mind, it waddles about everywhere. But if you write it down and keep looking at it again, this is what I want to do, and have that, develop that attitude. Now, how do you develop that attitude? Well, for me, it was about being around the right people. Just don't be around the negative people. Don't be around, I call them still people.
Mm.
People who say, I'm still broke, I'm still fat, I'm still uneducated. Don't be around them because they will just pull you down. Be around positive people. In fact, when you're in your car, don't just listen to a CD about songs and all that. Get a CD about educational attainment. Get a CD about attitude, direction,
Mhm.
focus, and read about them. And you will see how it changes your mind. You know, there was a book by a guy called Napoleon Hill.
Yeah, Think and Grow
And
Rich.
yeah, yeah, and everybody's read it. Everybody's read it. And me, I thought, I don't need it. I'm there. I've done it. I don't
Yeah,
need it.
yeah,
And you know, at the last lockdown in March,
yeah.
our office was closed from March till May. I ordered the book. Now, the book that you order, it can be in paperback for £10, or you can get a hardback for £30.
Yeah,
I chose to get the hardback
yeah.
because I didn't want to just to disintegrate. I bought, and in those 2 months, I read every day, every day. And you know, Raman, even that book that was published way back in the 1930s or thereabouts, and we're here at 2021 now, it gave me a new vision again. It gave me a new vision of how to develop myself further. So reading isn't a bad thing, but just reading is doing and stopping is not enough. Whatever you read, you've got to implement it. You know, it's like you're reading a diet sheet and you read all your diet sheet, but if you don't stick to that diet, it's not going to get you anywhere. If you
Definitely.
if you want to pass your test in driving and you read the highway code and you don't implement it, sooner or later you're going to have an accident. So it's
Definitely.
very important at whatever. Education does not stop at university. Education does not stop once you made £1 million. Education is an ongoing life story, and it goes on. And to me, education teaches you a new thing every day.
Ah, very interesting, very interesting. You raised some very interesting points there. I just wanted to comment on one of them. Like you said, never be around still people who are just still in their life and stuff. Because one time someone told me the story that, if a river is flowing continuously, it's nice and good, it smells nice, the environment around it is very nice. But when it stops, the water is still, it just attracts all these insects and mosquitoes and whatnot. So it's just always keep it flowing, and the people who want to do better in their life. So yeah, very interesting that.
No, definitely, definitely. And I think those people who are still, I can occasionally suss them out, but I try and have a one-to-one meeting with them
Mm.
because I don't want them to remain still either.
Yeah.
I try and show them a little way that, listen, this is what you're doing. This can be done just a little bit better. For example, I give you an example. One of my clients came in one day and he came in with a load of paperwork, just like that.
Yeah.
He put in front, and I said, this isn't the right way to do it. Immediately, I sent one of my staff out to go and get him a small briefcase, a messenger bag. I said, look, you put that in there, put it on your shoulder. Do you know that guy actually thanked me? He said, I understand what you're always talking about being organized. He said, see, when I walked into your room with a paperwork in my hand, it didn't mean anything. Once I came in with a messenger bag, he said, I thought of myself as important, that I'm being organized. So little things can help you in little ways. And those little things, you never know where they're going to finish off and do a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you raise a very important point there that, you helped your clients become more organized. And I've seen that about you, researching you and getting to know a bit more about you prior to this podcast. I've come to know that you go the extra mile for your clients, for your businesses, in your personal relationships. I've heard you talk on interviews how you give back to the community, whether it's through charities or how you help other clients. You go visit your clients and help them how they can improve the business as well. So talk to me about going the extra mile. Talk to me about giving that little bit extra. How important is that, and how can that help someone in their own life?
I think, Raman, that whatever I've learned in life, I don't want to take it with me. I want to share it with people. I went them because me being successful was not all up to me. It was a whole background of a lot of people who were around me, who they all helped. And if I started naming them, I'd be here all day. A lot of people have helped me to get where I am. And I believe that going the extra mile means that if somebody is doing something and it can be done better, show him. Don't just tell him. Show him the way how to do it. Because if he excels, then one day when I'm not here, Raman, when we're not here, somebody's going to say, see that Khalid Javid? He wasn't a bad lad at all. He did. And I believe that in my life, people have helped me in the same way, and to guide me to take a certain way. Well, how many times have you seen somebody trying to park a car and you wave them back? Come on back. You're helping them. How many times when somebody falls down the street, you don't just walk past them. You help them up and get them on their way. And I believe in business, in life, that's what it should be. That the guy next to you, wherever he is, he should be always helped. And the extra mile means that, to me, the extra mile means solving somebody's problem. I once had a client in London who stayed actually further in London, but we always met at the airport. And he used to say to me, Khalid, you tell me all these things. How come the guys in London don't tell me? And I sort of looked at him and said, well, I don't know, but I always believe that some people want to keep their knowledge to themselves because it allows them to command more money by the other people not knowing about it. But I think those days are gone. I think you must empower people with the knowledge that you have so that they can excel as well. Don't keep everything to yourself, that it's yours. We are not here forever and ever. Definitely. So the little that you do for other people goes on further away. during this talk that I've had with you, I've spoken about so many authors, so many people who
Yeah.
have made a difference in my life. And I hope that one day when maybe I'm not here, that somebody else will say, I learned this from Khalid Javid in Glasgow. And that would be the accolade of life, that you've gone and you've done something for somebody.
Great
So
stuff.
the extra mile doesn't mean just bettering them yourself, but people will also remember you, once in the hereafter, when you're not around.
Yeah.
But whatever little that you do, always try and, like you said, give them wee bit knowledge so that they can excel as well. Don't think yourself as above them, but think yourself as the same as them, but to give them the opportunity as well that you had, to pass it on. Raman, you're from Birmingham,
Yeah.
and one of the things that, how can I say, annoys me is that Birmingham was a metropolis of heavy industry.
Yeah.
Austin of England was there. Morris Motor Company was there, Broad Street, etc. That was a heavy industry, and there used to be a place up in Lickey Hills in Birmingham. I used to pass by, and it was the Austin of England factory, and I used to watch it. That I used to say, somebody's got to come around and rejuvenate this factory and make it big again.
Yeah.
And the next time I went there, it was all flattened and made houses. So the engineers, the mechanics, the people who worked for Austin or Morris, where are they all? Do you know where they are? They're still in Birmingham. But they chose to open their own small wee workshop rather than one big workshop for everybody. So the people in Birmingham, London, Manchester, even Glasgow, they need to get organized that, we don't need small shops. We need bigger shops. We need to work together. We don't need to work singly. We don't need to be a single one-man business person who opens the shutter in the morning, who does the cash and carry, who does the selling and the buying. We can segregate this to different people. So
Definitely.
the element of trust comes in, and Birmingham still has a lot of good people. Birmingham has a lot of good people. I just wish that Birmingham could get a wee bit more organized, and lead the chapter in the story that we're going to write of the next generation.
Right. So I have final two questions for you. So just before I head to my final question, this is a very important question. Is one that is very close to me. I wanted to ask you and get your opinions on it and get your advice on it in a way. So if someone was to going through a tough period through their life, like you went through in 1997 and previously, and whether it's to do with their relationship, whether they're dissatisfied with something, or they feel like they're just not becoming the extra bit that they want to, or they're not gaining the extra boost in their life, what is it that they need to do to start enjoying them aspects of their life, whether they're employer, whether it's in their relationship, or whether they are a business person? What is the things that they can do to start enjoying and learning more and like gaining more out of their life?
Well, come and talk to me. Raman, what I suggest is, if somebody is going through a difficult patch in their life, what a lot of people do is they keep thinking about the difficulties they're having and not looking at the opportunities that they could get. And I would suggest to anybody in whatever field they are, if you're having difficulty in life, go to the local library, pick up a book, take an hour out of your 24 hours a day and just read maybe a chapter or something. Reading gives you so much knowledge, it's unbelievable. Listening as well, nowadays you don't have to buy a book. You can get everything on audio. In fact, you don't even have to buy a CD. You can download it now and listen to people who have done well. And every morning at times I listen to people like Napoleon Hill. I listen to their chapters, and there's nothing wrong in listening to it again. Sometimes we've done wrong in life and we've got to correct it. Sometimes we don't get the opportunity in life because we're at the wrong place. So these opportunities in life, these wrongs that we do, they can all be corrected. They can all be corrected, provided you have the attitude to say, I am going to go and do this. I meet a lot of people who will say to me, Khalid, you've done well, you've lost weight, and it's great. How can I do it? And I said, well, do you go for exercises? Oh, occasionally. Do you go for a walk? Occasionally. But one of the things I say to them, well, why don't you control your diet a wee bit? Then they'll say, oh, yeah, I will have to go on a diet. That doesn't mean anything, Raman. When people say, I will have to go on a diet, that's just an intention. If they say, from today, I'm giving up Coca-Cola, that's an action they're taking. So that's what needs to be done. So whenever you do something in life that's not going right, you've got to stop the wrong that you're doing and try to go in the correct. Now, what is the wrong and what's the correct? On every different person, it's a different way of doing it. And I found all this, that the more you read, the more knowledge you get. The more you listen, the more knowledge you get. The more you see the more vision you're going to get. So if you want to excel in business, try and look for a person who's done well. Try and read what they're doing. If you're going through a bad patch in marriage, try and read books on marriages and relationships, how to do well. If you want to be, I still see a lot of motor mechanics who are doing something, but they always return back to the textbook and see, well, where it went. It's always nice. It's always, I occasionally, if I see a client who's not doing too well, I will give him a loan of my book and ask him to give it back. And then occasionally I'll ask him a question: did you read this chapter, that chapter, so to know that he's doing? But nobody comes with all the knowledge, but everybody comes with a brain.
Mhm.
Everybody's got the same brain. Nobody is one better than the other. It's how we use it that makes the difference.
Wonderful, great stuff. So now to my final question: what is your target personally? From life, from business, from your charity the programs that you are involved in, and how do you want people to remember you at the end of the day?
Oh, that's a very difficult question, Raman. How do you want people to remember me? I just, I think as I go around helping people, assisting them in every way possible. I'd walk down the street, Raman, if somebody's car's broken down, I help them push it. Oh, I've got nothing here, And I think if people take that chapter, that in life you've got to help everybody who's there. I think in life you've got to try and excel them, whether it's education, whatever. I think if they just help one another, that's a good way of remembering me, by helping one another, regardless of where you are. Raman, I share this with you. I was again in London not so long ago, and some of the London train stations, when you go down the steps, they're not escalators, they're actually they're made of concrete. And I remember coming up a set of steps, and I seen an Asian lady with 2 suitcases and 2 children standing at the top. And I thought, how is she going to get down with these 2 suitcases and 2 young children? And I said to the lady, allow me, I'll pick up your bags, you give a hand to your children. And quickly walked down the stairs. As I walked down the stairs, I noticed a gentleman standing there, an Asian gentleman with another 2 suitcases. I quickly learned that the gentleman went down with the 2 suitcases, but he could not leave them there and come back up because the suitcases would disappear rightly. So when I helped them down, and the chap was an ethnic minority Asian chap, and I said, there's your bags, there's your kids. And he was so happy. And I turned around to him and said, are you on holiday? He said, yes. And I said, where are you from? He said, I'm from India. And I turned around with a big smile and then said, I'm from Pakistan. And I shook his hand. I shook his hand. And that's the kind of attitude you should have in life, by helping everybody and anybody where they are, whether they're in business. And as long as you keep helping everybody else, that's how you want to remember me. Wherever it is, whether it's business, life, marriages, as long as you help somebody to excel and stay better, that's the thing to do.
Wonderful, great stuff. So I just want to finally end it by saying thank you ever so much for your time. It was a huge honor for me to ask you all these questions. I really hope it can help so many people, and someone can take even a little bit of ounce out of your experience and out of your life and make their own life better. So thank you ever so much for your time. I really, really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Raman, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be on here. If I can ever come back again regularly, please tap on my door at any time.
Wonderful.
And when I'm down in Birmingham, chai wala, you and me.
Oh, definitely, 100%, sir, 100%. It'll be a huge honor. Thank you. So I will end it here then. So yeah, it was a huge honor, sir. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really hope you have a lovely, fantastic day, and we'll definitely do a round 2 when I come down to Scotland, and we'll do it in person. That'll be an amazing thing. What do you think?
Excellent.
Wonderful, great stuff. Thank you so much for your time. Have a lovely day. You enjoy, sir. Thank you. Bye. Take care. Bye.